Overnight, the US voted again against a ceasefire in the UN. What's unfolding in the Middle East, in Palestine, is an absolute tragedy, and one, as we have said early in the piece when this war kicked off, that would not only destroy the lives of thousands of Palestinians, but would lead to a new wave of anti-Semitism. It's bad for the Palestinian people. It's bad for the Jewish people. It is bad for the world. And the media and political classes in Western nations are responsible for giving Benjamin Netanyahu the imprimatur for genocide. Now, we broke the story this week of Australia's Future Fund, that it has an investment in an Elbit Systems, an Israeli defence contractor whose bombs are killing civilians in Gaza. We have blood on our hands as a nation. This investment, despite Elbit being not only banned for human rights violations by global banks and pension funds, and for its association with cluster bombs, which are banned in modern warfare, but also, bizarrely, Elbit is even on the Future Fund's own ban. Nonetheless, here we are, an investor. The revelations came from FOIs obtained by Senator David Shoebridge and are published on Michael West Media. You can read them there. On top of Australia's so-called friendship with the government of Benjamin Netanyahu and the assistance via the Pine Gap surveillance facility which we give the State of Israel in its bombardment of Gaza, the FOIs are proof that this country's involvement in human rights abuses is well in play, and therefore the genocide of the Palestinian people. Unfortunately, the good Jewish people are also affected around the world by that, because there is an undeniable rise in anti-Semitism. You only have to go on social media to see it. This is where we are going, a tragedy for both sides, fueled by Western governments and media in the thrall of the Zionist lobby. More than 18,000 Palestinians have now been killed in the Israeli onslaught in Gaza since the Hamas attacks on Israel of October 7. More than half of these people are women and children. The vast majority of them are not Hamas, but they are civilians, and then there are the countless maimed. Australia has refused international calls for a ceasefire too. We've abstained, and our official position is that the government of Israel is a friend and that we are adhering to the global rules-based order by supporting Israel's so-called self-defense. The evidence clearly shows. You just have to look at the numbers, the images and the reporting, what little of it is, because journalists are banned from going in there unless they're embedded with the IDF. The evidence clearly shows that Australia is defending the indefensible, and it is a depressing tragedy. And the support is driven by the aggressive Israel state propaganda machine, the pro-Netanyahu lobby, whose sway over the MSM is immense. We've not seen a campaign like it, from the meek and misleading reproduction of false Netanyahu government propaganda, the PR and the corporate media, beheaded babies and all that kind of thing, but also paying off influencers in social media, Instagram and Twitter and so on, and the relentless bullying and character assassination of anybody who speaks out about it as being anti-Semitic. Make no mistake about this, the propaganda war has backfired. 600 prominent Australians signed a letter late last month as part of the Say No to Anti-Semitism campaign, and the campaign got prominent treatment in the Nine and Murdoch press and elsewhere. Now, we have nothing against prominent Australians or prominence in general. Some of our supporters here are prominent people. The sentiments voiced in this letter are to be extolled too. Concern about the rise in anti-Semitism. They tossed in Islamophobia as well, but it was clearly a defence of Israel in diplomatic language. Indeed, we should say no to anti-Semitism, to racism in general. Yet this campaign effectively lends the imprimatur to the war crimes being perpetrated by the government of Netanyahu. And it follows the letter from 6 PMs, orchestrated by the Zionist lobby, the one that Paul Keating refused to sign. These people are even more prominent. You don't get more prominent than that. But the problem is they have missed the mark. They are part of the problem, not the solution. The failure of leadership is absolutely catastrophic for Palestinian and Jewish people alike. The failure to call for a ceasefire, the failure to condemn the Netanyahu government. Now, we did a piece 6 weeks ago on the captive Australian media going on their Israel junkets. And we forecast in no uncertain terms that it was this butcher, Netanyahu, and his cronies, that this massacre would continue unless there was stronger action. And we also forecast quite clearly, and we hate to say I told you so, particularly in this terrible situation, but that it would lead to a rise in anti-Semitism. Well, it has. Just so we get this straight, to combat the inevitable backlash from anonymous cowardly trolls on social media, not all Jewish people are pro-Netanyahu. Not all Palestinians are Hamas supporters. And saying no to the Israeli government's disgraceful mass murder, as well as the October 7 Hamas attacks, is not anti-Semitic, as the proponents of the Zionist lobby would have you believe. It's not anti-Semitic to criticise a government which kills civilians en masse. Now, if these prominent people were thinking straight, if they had the courage, they would have called for a ceasefire. They would have called for peace talks, a stop to the killing. The evidence of war crimes is undeniable. Human rights abuses unassailable. The numbers, the deaths on each side, are grotesquely disproportionate. And so it is, this paradox. The Israel lobby has just completely blown it. This is on them. Jewish and non-Jewish alike. This is on them. Until now, prominent people have been afraid to go public in criticising Israel warmongering. They were afraid because of the ridiculous allegations of anti-Semitism which inevitably follow. Some consideration should be given to the working men and women of the mainstream media, not their leaders, but the journalists themselves. Hundreds of them signed a letter calling for fair coverage of the events in the Middle East. Bizarrely, the SMH editor even warned anybody involved in this insurrection would be pulled off the Israel coverage. And the coverage has been disgraceful, straight out of the Israel state public relations playbook. The leaders of the corporate media have blood on their hands. They are patsies. We're following our coverage of this. Crikey published a list of prominent journalists and editors who have been on the junkets to Israel, financed by the Israeli government. It's a lot of the leadership of the mainstream media and politicians too, and this has led to them being captured. But you can't beat the internet. People are not believing it. They're not drinking the Kool-Aid. Thanks to the public backlash globally from those on social media recoiling in horror at the pictures coming out of Gaza daily, people are not buying it. The courage of those willing to speak out, however, should be applauded. They were being bagged in the Murdoch press as usually today, such as the publisher Louise Adler, herself Jewish, who spoke so powerfully in support of human rights in an interview with Laura Tingle on the 7:30 report on the ABC. It's a tragedy, she said, that we are being silenced. This from a woman whose father was murdered by the Nazis in Birkenau during World War II. Adler spoke of the relentless attacks of the Israel lobby on free speech, the efforts to attack sponsors of the Adelaide Writers' Festival, which she organises, simply because there were Palestinian writers included. There is a bigger thing at play here, and that goes to the decaying trust in institutions, government and otherwise, for not showing leadership, for not acting with common sense, and seeing that this backlash would inevitably occur and lead to anti-Semitism and further conflict, and generations of Palestinians motivated now. This failing credibility of the institutions is a recipe for disaster and a risk for democracy, and it plays directly into the hands of China and Russia and other non-allies who have taken a more sensible approach on the Middle East and called for ceasefire and peace talks. It's a direct hit, the whole thing, to what our government describes as the global rules-based order, a euphemism for American imperialism. The UK is along for the ride, as is the Australian government. How can Australia and its allies expect not to see their authority in world affairs undermined when they support such terrible war crimes? Thank you for your support. Please like, share and comment below, and keep it nice, because the anti-Semitism thing is gone. It's finished. That goodwill is gone thanks to the failure of leadership in Western nations.